The crystal chandeliers of Monte Carlo's most exclusive venue sparkled above me like frozen tears, a fitting backdrop for what would become the worst night of my life. I stood there in my crimson Valentino gown, champagne flute in hand, watching my husband work the room with the practiced ease of a career sociopath. My name is Valentina, and until 10 minutes ago, I thought I was celebrating the successful launch of my sustainable fashion venture. Did you hear about Ethan's latest coup? A woman's voice, thick with conspiracy, drifted from behind a marble column. The way he manipulated James Moore's daughter was brilliant. I froze, my glass halfway to my lips. Married her just to get to her father's connections, another voice chimed in. And now he's positioning himself to take over her new company. Margaret must be so proud of her boy. The champagne turned bitter in my mouth. 3 years of marriage crystallized into something ugly and distorted, like looking through a cracked mirror. Across the room, Ethan caught my eye and raised his glass. His smile never reached his eyes. How had I never noticed that before? My mother-in-law, Margaret, stood beside him, her pewter dress and rigid posture, a perfect match for her steel gray hair and calculating expression. Valentina! Lily, my best friend, appeared at my elbow. The investors are asking for you. They're ready to sign the... She trailed off, studying my face. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. I grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the terrace. The Mediterranean air hit us like a warm blanket, heavy with the scent of jasmine and betrayal. My entire marriage is a lie, I said, the words tasting like ash. Ethan married me to get to my father, to steal my company. Lily's face drained of color. How do you know? I told her about the conversation I'd overheard. With each word, my shock hardened into something darker, more dangerous. What are you going to do? She asked. Before I could answer, the terrace doors opened. Ethan stepped out, all charm and perfectly tailored Tom Ford. There's my brilliant wife, he said, reaching for me. The investors are impressed. Everything's falling into place exactly as planned. I let him pull me close, fighting the urge to recoil. His cologne, once comforting, now seemed cloying, suffocating. As planned, I repeated, meeting his gaze. Something in my tone made his smile falter. Is everything all right, darling? Perfect, I said, forcing a smile that felt like broken glass. Everything's perfect. Margaret appeared in the doorway, her eyes narrow and watchful. Ethan, dear, Senator Williams is asking for you. Something about that development project we discussed. The development project. My development project. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Of course, Mother. Ethan squeezed my hand. We'll celebrate properly later, Val. I watched them disappear inside. My husband and his mother, architects of my destruction. The night air suddenly felt too thin to breathe. Valentina? Lily touched my arm. What are you thinking? I turned to look at the glittering Monaco coastline, where million-dollar yachts bobbed like expensive toys in a billionaire's bathtub. My father had always said that in business, timing was everything. He'd also taught me that revenge, like fine wine, was best served at precisely the right moment. I'm thinking, I said slowly, that it's time I learned exactly how deep this betrayal goes. And then I finished my champagne in one swift motion. Then I'm going to make them wish they'd never heard the name Moore. Lily's eyes widened. You're going to fight back? No, I said, placing my empty glass on the balustrade. I'm going to destroy them, both of them, and I'll do it with the same smile Ethan's been wearing for the past 3 years. Inside, the party continued, a glittering facade hiding darker truths. Just like my marriage, just like my life, but not for much longer. The morning after the gala, I sat in our penthouse study, methodically going through Ethan's laptop while he showered. My hands didn't shake anymore. The numbness had settled in, making every betrayal I uncovered feel like reading someone else's tragedy. Email after email confirmed what I'd overheard. 3 years of correspondence between Ethan and Margaret, plotting their way into my father's empire through me. The laptop screen reflected my face, pale and composed, as I forwarded everything to my private account. The shower stopped running. I closed the laptop just as Ethan walked in, towel around his waist, water droplets still clinging to his shoulders. Already working? He smiled that perfect smile. The investors were impressed last night. We should celebrate properly. Actually, I said, standing up, I'd like to discuss something else. I moved to the window, putting distance between us. Tell me about Project Phoenix. The silence lasted 2 heartbeats too long. It's just a preliminary business proposal, he said carefully. Nothing concrete yet. Interesting. I turned to face him. Because according to the board meeting minutes from last week, you've already pitched taking control of my company's sustainable fashion line. Apparently, I'm too inexperienced to handle it myself. Color drained from his face. Val, I can explain. Can you explain the emails to my father's board members? Or the ones to your mother, planning this since before our wedding? My voice remained steady, each word a carefully placed blade. 3 years, Ethan? Was any of it real? He moved toward me, reaching out. Of course it was real. I love you, Valentina. Yes, there were opportunities I pursued, but don't. I stepped back. Don't insult me with more lies. The door opened and Margaret swept in, immaculate in her mourning pearls and judgment. Darling, I heard voices. Oh. Her eyes narrowed at the scene before her. Is everything all right? Perfect timing, Margaret. I smiled, watching her flinch at the use of her first name instead of mother. We were just discussing Project Phoenix, your masterpiece, isn't it? Grooming your son to marry the Moore heiress? Margaret's facade cracked for just a moment before smoothing over. I see you're upset. Perhaps we should all calm down and discuss this rationally. Rational? I laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut. Like systematically dismantling my company while pretending to support me? Or maybe like manipulating my father's board against me? You're being dramatic, Margaret said. Everything we've done has been for your benefit. You needed guidance. I needed a husband, I interrupted. Instead, I got a corporate spy. Ethan stepped forward, his mask slipping. You don't understand business, Valentina. Your father knows that. Why do you think he never gave you any real responsibility until now? The words hit their mark. My father's distance, his constant criticism, it all played into their hands perfectly. Get out, I said quietly. Val, get out of my study, both of you. I turned back to the window, spine straight. And Ethan, pack a bag. I'm sure your mother has a guest room ready. You're making a mistake. Margaret's voice turned sharp. Think carefully about your next move, Valentina. You're not the only one with something to lose. I didn't turn around. Is that a threat, Margaret? A reminder, she said smoothly. Families should stick together, shouldn't we? The door closed behind them. I waited until their footsteps faded before pulling out my phone and dialing. Lily, I need a favor. I watched my reflection in the window, seeing something harder in my eyes than before. Remember that lawyer you mentioned? Lucas Bennett? Set up a meeting. Today. Are you okay? Lily asked. No, I said honestly, but I will be. They want to play with corporate takeovers? Fine. Let's see how they handle someone who's got nothing left to lose. After hanging up, I opened my laptop again, starting a new document. At the top, I typed Project Nemesis. Below it, I began listing names, board members, investors, everyone who'd chosen sides before I even knew there was a war. The sun climbed higher over Monte Carlo, casting long shadows across the study floor. Somewhere in the penthouse, I could hear Ethan packing, Margaret's voice a low murmur of instruction and damage control. Let them plot. Let them threaten. They thought they'd married a naive heiress. They were about to meet a Moor. Lucas Bennett's office overlooked the Mediterranean, but unlike Ethan's carefully curated spaces, this one felt lived in, real. The man himself sat across from me, reviewing the documents I'd brought with an expression that gave nothing away. "Your husband's been busy," he said finally, setting down the papers. "These backdoor deals with your board members. They're clever, almost untraceable." "Almost?" I leaned forward. "There's always a trail if you know where to look." Lucas's dark eyes met mine. "Question is, what do you want to do with this information?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A news alert. My stomach dropped as I read the headline. "More Enterprises announces leadership changes. Ethan Carter to head new sustainable fashion division." "That bastard?" I whispered, showing Lucas the screen. "He's making his move already." "Your father approved this?" "James Moore doesn't approve things. He orchestrates them." The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. "He's probably convinced himself this is for my own good." Lucas stood, walking to a cabinet. He returned with 2 glasses and a bottle of scotch. "Tell me about the company structure." I accepted the drink, grateful for its burn. The sustainable fashion line was supposed to be my proving ground, independent from more enterprises, but with their backing. Now Ethan's positioned himself as the experienced choice to lead it. "And your father's board agreed?" "They never saw me as anything but James Moore's rebellious daughter." I laughed without humor. "The irony is, I fought so hard to prove I wasn't using my father's name. I never saw Ethan using it instead." My phone buzzed again. Margaret's number. "Aren't you going to answer that?" Lucas asked. "No need. I know what she's calling about." I took another sip. She'll be arranging a family dinner, a chance to discuss things rationally while they explain why this is all for the best. "And if you refuse, they'll start freezing me out. Accounts, contacts, contracts, anything they can leverage." The glass felt cool against my palm. "Margaret's already reached out to our major suppliers. 3 canceled their contracts this morning." Lucas leaned back, studying me. "You're remarkably calm for someone watching their dream collapse." "Because they made a mistake." I set down my glass. "They thought I'd break down or run to my father for help. They don't understand what it means to be a Moor." "And what does it mean? We don't get mad?" I smiled, and it felt dangerous. "We get even." Lucas's phone chimed. He checked it, then turned his laptop toward me. "Speaking of getting even, look at this. Your husband's been making some interesting transfers through a shell company in the Caymans." I scanned the numbers, feeling my pulse quicken. "These dates, they match up with our major investment rounds." "He's been skimming," Lucas nodded. "Clever setup, but not clever enough. Your father-in-law's death last year left some loose ends in the paperwork." "Margaret's husband?" I straightened. "She told everyone it was a heart attack." "The official story usually is." Lucas pulled up more documents. "But look at these insurance investigations and the timing of Ethan's first transfers." The pieces clicked together. They used the insurance payout to start positioning Ethan in my father's company. "And there's your weapon." Lucas closed his laptop. "The question is, are you ready to use it?" My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Lily. "Margaret's here at the office. She's calling an emergency board meeting. V, what's happening?" I showed Lucas the message. "They're moving faster than I expected." "They're scared." He stood, gathering the documents. "People in power only move this quickly when they're afraid of losing control." "Then let's give them something to really be afraid of." I pulled out my own laptop. "How quickly can you get me those insurance records?" "By tonight." Lucas paused. "Once we start this, there's no going back. Your family, your marriage." "My marriage died the moment I heard my husband plotting to steal my company." I met his gaze steadily. "And family? Real family doesn't try to destroy you while claiming it's for your own good." The Mediterranean sun was setting. painting the office in shades of gold and shadow. In that light, I could see something in Lucas's expression shift from professional interest to something more personal. All right then, he said, reaching for his phone. Let's go hunting. The Moore family estate loomed before me, a modernist fortress of glass and steel that had never felt like home. My father's invitation, delivered through his assistant naturally, hadn't been a request. The security guard's sympathetic nod as I passed told me the news about Ethan's promotion had spread. I found James Moore in his study, Manhattan skyline stretching behind him like a crown. He didn't look up from his tablet. The board meeting's tomorrow, he said instead of hello. Ethan's prepared a comprehensive strategy for the sustainable fashion division. My division. I remained standing, refusing the chair he gestured to. The one you promised would be mine to run. The one I promised would stay in the family. He finally met my eyes, which it will, because my husband counts as family now, more than your daughter, because your husband understands business isn't about ego. He set down his tablet. This tantrum of yours needs to end, Valentina. Margaret called me about your behavior. Of course she did. I laughed, the sound sharp enough to make him flinch. Tell me, did she mention the insurance investigation into her husband's death? Or the money Ethan's been funneling through the Caymans? That got his attention. What are you talking about? Before I could answer, the study door opened. Ethan walked in, followed by Margaret. The air turned electric with unspoken accusations. James, Margaret's smile was perfect as ever. I hope we're not interrupting. Actually, I started, but my father cut me off. Perfect timing. We were just discussing tomorrow's board meeting. He looked at me, where I expect everyone to behave professionally. Professional? I pulled out my phone, pulling up the documents Lucas had sent. Like these transfer records? Ethan stepped forward, but Margaret's hand on his arm stopped him. Her eyes never left me. James, perhaps we should discuss this privately. Nothing about this is private anymore. I moved to my father's desk, setting down my phone. The insurance company's reopening their investigation into Robert Carter's death. Interesting timing on those initial transfers, Ethan. The color drained from Margaret's face. Ethan's mask slipped, showing something ugly underneath. You're making dangerous accusations, he said quietly. No, I met his gaze. I'm making promises. My father picked up my phone, scanning the documents. His expression hardened with each swipe. Where did you get these? Does it matter? They're real. I turned to Margaret. You wanted a war? Congratulations. You've got one. Valentina, my father's voice carried that familiar warning tone. Think carefully about your next move. Family disputes should stay within the family. Family? I gestured to Ethan and Margaret. They're not family. They're parasites who saw your name and decided to take everything that came with it. That's enough. Margaret stepped forward. James, surely you see what she's doing. This desperate attempt to maintain control. The only desperate one here is you, I cut in. How long before the insurance investigators connect those transfers to Robert's death? How many board members will stand behind Ethan then? The silence that followed was deafening. My father stood, his expression unreadable. Everyone out, he said quietly, except Valentina. Margaret opened her mouth to protest, but his glare stopped her. She left, practically dragging Ethan with her. Once the door closed, my father walked to the window. You understand what you're starting. They started it. I'm finishing it. At what cost? He turned back to me. You're talking about destroying people's lives. They tried to destroy mine first. I moved to stand beside him, looking out over the city. You taught me that Moors don't back down, or was that lesson only for your sons? He was quiet for a long moment. You have proof? Real proof? Enough to start an investigation that will bury them. I met his reflection in the glass. The question is, whose side will you be on when it happens? You're asking me to choose between my daughter and the stability of my company. No, I headed for the door. I'm telling you to choose before I make the choice irrelevant. I left him there, staring out at his empire. In the elevator, my phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. Insurance investigators want to meet tomorrow. I smiled at my reflection in the elevator's mirrored walls. Let them have their board meeting. I had an appointment with Karma. The insurance investigator's office felt like neutral ground, but I knew better. Nothing was neutral anymore. Lucas sat beside me while two stern-faced men reviewed our evidence about Robert Carter's death. These transfers, the older investigator said, they began within hours of Mr. Carter's death, before the body was even cold, I confirmed, watching their expressions shift. And there's more. My phone buzzed. Lily's message made my blood freeze. Margaret's here at the office. She's going through your files. The younger investigator leaned forward. Miss Moore, you were saying? Excuse me, I stood abruptly. We need to continue this later. Lucas followed me out, catching my arm in the hallway. Valentina, wait. What's wrong? Margaret's at my office. I showed him the message. She's after the backup files. His face darkened. The ones proving Ethan's embezzlement and the original insurance documents. I was already moving toward the elevator. Everything we need for tomorrow's board meeting. I'll call security. No, I pressed the lobby button. I want to handle this myself. The drive to my office felt endless. When I arrived, Lily was waiting in the lobby, pale and shaking. She brought lawyers, she whispered. They're saying something about corporate espionage, that you stole confidential documents. Of course they are. I headed for the elevator, Lucas close behind. Where's Ethan? Upstairs with them. Val, there's something else. Lily caught my arm. Your father's here too. The elevator doors opened to chaos. Margaret stood in my office doorway, directing men in suits as they boxed up files. Ethan was at my desk, his hands on my laptop. Step away from my computer. My voice cut through the noise like a blade. Margaret turned, her smile razor sharp. Valentina, dear, how nice of you to join us. This is illegal entry, Lucas said, pulling out his phone. I'm calling the police. Actually, my father's voice came from behind my desk. It's a legal audit. He held up a document, authorized by the board due to suspicious activity. Suspicious activity? I laughed. Like Ethan's offshore accounts? Or Margaret's insurance fraud? Careful, darling. Margaret's voice dropped low. Accusations like that could be considered defamation. Truth is an absolute defense. I moved toward my desk, but two lawyers stepped in my way. The truth? Ethan finally spoke, looking up from my laptop. Like how you've been meeting with corporate raiders, planning hostile takeovers? What? He turned my laptop around, showing emails I'd never seen. Your secret meetings with Lucas Bennett? He's known for destroying companies from the inside. I turned to Lucas, who looked as confused as I felt. That's not... We have proof, Margaret interrupted, holding up a file. All your little schemes documented right here. The realization hit like ice water. They'd planted evidence. While I was gathering proof of their crimes, they were fabricating mine. Dad, I turned to my father, seeing doubt in his eyes. You can't believe this. The evidence is quite compelling, he said quietly. The board will need to review everything before tomorrow's meeting. The board? I stepped forward. Lawyers be damned. Or just the members in Margaret's pocket. That's enough. My father's voice hardened. Security will escort you out. Until this investigation is complete, you're suspended from all company activities. You can't. He can. Margaret smiled. Board approval was unanimous. Security appeared in the doorway. I looked at my father, seeing not anger, but disappointment. The same look he'd given me my entire life. Fine. I straightened my spine. Take everything. But remember something, Margaret. You taught me how to play this game. Is that a threat, dear? No, I met her eyes. It's a promise, and unlike you, I keep mine. As security let us out, I caught Lily's eye. She gave an imperceptible nod. We'd planned for this redundant backups, offshore servers. Margaret might have my office, but she didn't have everything. In the lobby, Lucas grabbed my arm. Valentina, I swear I had nothing to do with. I know, I pulled away. But right now, I need you to leave. All of you. What are you going to do? Lily asked. I watched the sun setting behind the city skyline, casting long shadows across the marble floor. What Moors do best, I said. I'm going to burn it all down and rebuild from the ashes. The security guard held the door open, sympathy in his eyes. I walked out with my head high, Margaret's victory celebration floating down from above. Let them celebrate. Tomorrow would be a different story. The penthouse felt empty without Ethan's carefully curated art collection. I sat in darkness, watching city lights flicker through an empty wine glass when the security system chimed. Margaret Carter stood at my door, alone. I buzzed her in. Why not? Rock Bottom had plenty of room for visitors. No lawyers this time? I asked as she entered, her Hermes heels clicking against marble floors. This isn't a legal visit. She surveyed the bare walls, her lip curling. Ethan's taste in art was always impeccable. Shame about his taste in mothers. She settled into a chair uninvited, smoothing her skirt. I have a proposition for you. Let me guess. Resign quietly, admit to corporate espionage, disappear with my reputation in tatters? Actually, she pulled out an envelope. I'm offering you an escape route. Inside was a check with enough zeros to start over anywhere in the world. My hands didn't shake as I set it down. Buying me off with my husband's stolen money. How poetic. Don't be dramatic. Margaret's voice hardened. You've lost, Valentina. The board believes our evidence. Your father's disappointed. Even your friend Lily signed an affidavit about your suspicious meetings with Lucas Bennett. The last part hit like a physical blow. You're lying. Am I? She produced another document. Lily's signature was unmistakable. Everyone has a price. Hers was protecting her family's small business from sudden tax audits. My phone buzzed. Lucas, emergency, call immediately. Your father always worried you were too soft for business, Margaret continued. Too idealistic. He was right. My phone buzzed again. Lily this time. I'm so sorry. They threatened my parents. What did you do to Robert? The question surprised us both. Your husband, was it worth it? Something flickered in Margaret's eyes. Pain, maybe, or fear. You don't know what you're talking about. The insurance investigation reopens tomorrow. Those transfers weren't just about money, were they? What happened that night? She stood abruptly. Sign the resignation letter, take the money, disappear. Or what? Or tomorrow's papers run a story about your mental breakdown, your history of instability, your mother's suicide. The wine glass shattered in my hand. Blood or wine dripped onto the marble. I couldn't tell which. That's sealed in my juvenile records. Nothing sealed from people with enough motivation. She moved to the door. You have until midnight. Choose wisely. After she left, my phone exploded with messages. Lucas had been arrested for corporate espionage. Lily's parents' business was being audited. My father had called an emergency board meeting for mourning. I stood at the window watching Margaret's car pull away. 3 years of marriage, a lifetime of trying to prove myself, all reduced to ashes because I dared to fight back. The elevator chimed again. This time it was Ethan. Come to gloat? I asked without turning. Come to understand. He moved beside me. All this destruction, this vendetta, was it worth it? You tell me. Was destroying my life worth it? I did love you, you know. His voice softened. At first, before Mother. Don't. I finally faced him. Don't pretend you're a victim here. Everyone's a victim in your mother's games. He looked tired suddenly, human. Why do you think my father died? The implications hit like thunder. What are you saying? I'm saying take the money. He headed for the door. Run, before you end up like him. After he left, I stood in my empty penthouse, blood drying on my hand, watching my phone light up with more devastating news. My corporate accounts frozen, my passport flagged, my life systematically dismantled by a woman who'd perfected the art of destruction. I picked up the check Margaret had left. Enough money to disappear, start over. Forget revenge, forget justice, forget everything except survival. My phone buzzed one final time, an unknown number, but I recognized the Monte Carlo area code. Miss Moore? A heavily accented voice asked. This is Inspector Rousseau. About your father-in-law's case, we found something in the original autopsy report, something Margaret Carter paid to hide. I looked at the check in my hand, then at my reflection in the darkened window. In the glass, I saw my mother's eyes staring back at me. Tell me everything, I said. Sometimes you have to lose everything to remember who you really are. The annual Moore Enterprises Charity Gala buzzed with nervous energy. Everyone knew something was coming. They just didn't know what. I watched from the shadows as Margaret worked the room, her silver dress catching light like armor, while Ethan charmed investors with practiced ease. Inspector Rousseau's evidence burned in my clutch bag. One USB drive containing everything. Robert Carter's real autopsy report, the offshore accounts, and Margaret's carefully hidden paper trail. They're ready, Lucas whispered, appearing beside me. Fresh from his release on dropped charges, he looked more determined than ever. The prosecutors are standing by. And my father? Front row as requested. I straightened my black gown. Morning colors seemed appropriate. Then it's time. The microphone feedback cut through the chatter as I took the stage. Margaret's smile froze mid-conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, tonight we're here to discuss legacy. My eyes found my father's, and the lengths some people will go to protect it. Ethan started moving through the crowd toward me. I continued before he could reach the stage. 3 years ago, Robert Carter died suddenly. The official cause was heart failure. I clicked the remote and hospital records filled the screen behind me. The unofficial cause was something far more deliberate. Margaret's champagne glass shattered on the marble floor. Valentina. Ethan reached the stage. Don't do this. Why not? I turned to him. Afraid someone might discover how your mother orchestrated your father's death, or how you helped her hide the evidence? The room erupted in whispers. Security moved forward, but my father raised his hand, stopping them. These are serious accusations, Margaret's voice carried across the room as she approached, and completely unfounded. Really? I clicked again. Bank statements appeared. These transfers from the Cayman Islands tell a different story, as does the original toxicology report your money helped bury. Enough, Margaret's composure cracked. You ungrateful little. Ungrateful? I laughed. For what? The way you manipulated my marriage? Or how you threatened Lily's family to force her cooperation? Everything I did was for this family's legacy, Margaret hissed, close enough now that only the front rows could hear. Robert was weak. He would have destroyed everything we built. Like father, like son? I glanced at Ethan, who had gone pale. You don't understand, he started. I understand perfectly. I faced the crowd again. The prosecutors have everything, the real autopsy report, the financial trails, the threats. It's over. Margaret lunged for the microphone, but I stepped back. You'll destroy this company. No, Margaret. My father's voice cut through the chaos as he stood. You did that the moment you decided murder was an acceptable business strategy. Security moved in, this time toward Margaret and Ethan. The room exploded with camera flashes and gasps as Margaret was led away, her perfect composure finally shattered. Ethan remained frozen on stage. Val, please. I didn't know. At first, I didn't know. But you figured it out. I met his eyes one last time, and you chose to help her anyway. As he was led away, I felt nothing but emptiness. No satisfaction, no triumph, just the hollow echo of justice served cold. My father approached the stage. You could have warned me. Would you have believed me? No, he smiled sadly. You really are your mother's daughter. She never backed down either. The room was clearing now, reporters rushing to file their stories, guests fleeing the scandal. I stayed on stage, watching my carefully planned revenge play out exactly as intended. Lucas appeared with 2 glasses of champagne. To justice served? I took one but didn't drink. To the price of revenge. Was it worth it? Through the grand windows, I could see police lights reflecting off the building's glass facade. Margaret sat in the back of a police car, head held high even now. Ethan was being questioned nearby, his perfect facade crumbling under the weight of truth. Ask me tomorrow, I said, finally taking a sip, when the echoes fade. But even then, watching my husband and mother-in-law's world collapse, I knew some echoes never really fade. They just become part of who you are. The prison visiting room smelled of industrial cleaner and regret. Margaret Carter sat across from me, her orange jumpsuit a jarring contrast to her perfect posture. 3 months into her sentence, she hadn't lost her edge, just her freedom. I expected you sooner, she said, studying my face. Come to gloat? Actually, I came to understand. I placed a yellowed envelope on the table. I found this in Robert's old office files, a letter he wrote to you before he died. Her hands trembled slightly as she touched the envelope. Where did you get this? The same place I found his original business plans, the ones showing he wanted to donate half the company's profits to charity. I watched her expression shift. That's why you did it, isn't it? He wasn't weak. He was threatening your idea of legacy. Legacy isn't about charity, she spat. It's about power, control, something my son never understood either. Is that why you molded him? Turned him into your weapon? I made him strong. Her voice cracked slightly. Everything I did was to protect what we built. No, I stood. Everything you did was because you were afraid of losing control, of becoming irrelevant. Just like you were afraid I'd make the company something you couldn't control. She didn't respond, her fingers still tracing the envelope's edges. I'm not pressing charges about the attempt on my life, I added. The murder conviction is enough. How generous. Her smile was bitter. And Ethan? Taking a plea deal. He'll serve 5 years. I moved toward the door. He's also agreed to testify about your other victims. Other? She paled slightly. What are you talking about? I placed another document on the table. The investigators found more suspicious deaths. 3 other business partners over 20 years. Did you think nobody would ever connect the dots? Her mask finally cracked, showing something almost human underneath. You don't understand what it takes to build an empire. No, you don't understand what it takes to build a legacy. I knocked for the guard. Real power isn't about control, Margaret. It's about creation. Back in the city, I found my father waiting in my office. The sustainable fashion line's latest designs covered the walls. My vision finally realized. The board approved your proposal, he said without preamble. Full autonomy over the charitable foundation. And the environmental initiatives? Greenlit. He smiled slightly. You're changing everything we built. I'm building something new. I moved to the window. Something that matters. Your mother would be proud. He joined me, the city sprawling before us. She always said revenge was a waste of energy. Better to create than destroy. Is that why you let me handle Margaret my way? I let you handle it your way because you proved you could. He touched my shoulder briefly. The company's yours when you're ready. All of it. After he left, I found Lucas waiting in the lobby. "Heard about your visit to Margaret," he said. "Find what you were looking for?" "I found something better." I handed him a business proposal. A partnership, equal stakes, focused on sustainable development and social impact. He scanned the document, eyebrows rising. "This is ambitious." "That's the point." I took back the proposal. "Interested?" His answer was interrupted by Lily rushing in, waving a tablet. "Have you seen this? Margaret's requesting an appeal." I smiled, remembering Margaret's face when she saw those additional investigation files. "Let her try. Some echoes can't be silenced." "You knew she would, didn't you?" Lucas asked. "I knew she'd never stop trying to control things." I headed for the elevator. "That's why I made sure the evidence about the other murders went public. She'll spend the rest of her life fighting shadows. And Ethan will learn to live with his choices, just like I have." The elevator opened to the street, where the evening light painted everything in shades of possibility. My phone buzzed with a message from the detective in Monte Carlo. More evidence found in Robert's old files. More secrets coming to light. Some people might call it karma. I called it justice, served not just with vengeance, but with purpose. "So what now?" Lucas asked as we stepped into the fading day. I looked up at the building that bore my family's name, seeing not its shadow, but its potential. "Now," I said, "we build something worth inheriting."